Hey guys, how's it going? So today I present to you this little beast, or I guess you could say it's a big beast. Kind of depends on what you think a large or a small server is. Um, but this is a SPARC Enterprise M4000, manufactured by none other than Sun Microsystems. Well, it's kind of manufactured by Sun Microsystems. We'll touch on that a little bit later. So as far as specs go, it comes in a 6U rack mount chassis. It supports up to 256 gigs of RAM, and it has two processors. Well, again, kind of two processors. They're not traditional processors that we would think of, socketing into the motherboard directly. They're a little bit different. So again, we'll touch on that a little bit later as well. So here's the front of the machine, and the first thing that stands out is the fact that the power supplies are in the front. They're right there, those two power supplies. Funny story about that, actually. When I first received this box, it came to me with one bad power supply. I have the casing for it right here. As you can see, it is a Delta. I have no idea why this is the case, but for some reason, when it comes to Sun Microsystems servers, Delta power supplies are the absolute worst. For whatever reason, they just keep failing left and right as they age. And I don't know why that is because, I have tons of HP and Dell servers and other manufacturers of servers, and the Delta power supplies work great at them. It's just Sun stuff that they suck in. So I actually bought a replacement and already installed it. I took the casing off of the Delta power supply to try to figure out, what exactly went wrong with it. I tested out, all the MOSFETs, capacitors, all the typical components you would think would go wrong, and actually it came back testing out just fine. So my thought is there's a little controller board in there that actually controls the relays that initiate, all the power to the main board and stuff like that, and I believe that's where the fault was, which really isn't a replaceable part, unfortunately. So I didn't feel like sending the whole box back because it weighs 180 pounds. It's real expensive to ship, and a replacement power supply is like $15 on the secondhand market. So, I just picked up another one. So, as far as removing a power supply goes, I've already loosened this, but there's a little Phillips head screw here. It's green. It's a set screw, and it's spring loaded and locked in, so it doesn't actually come all the way out. It just loosens up. So, you loosen that screw up, slide the latch forward, and the whole unit just slide out. You can see right here, there's a little metal plate that falls down, and that kind of keeps the airflow in the server, still going in the proper direction once you've pulled one of these out. But you can see it's an Aztec model. I bought the replacement was also, which is this one, which is also an Aztec model. I just wanted them to match. Aztec really isn't my favorite power supply manufacturer for Sun servers either. My favorite is Tyco, but they're way more reliable than Deltas. They just don't quite have the build quality that the Tyco supplies have. So we're going to set this back in. So on to the rest of the stuff. You have two 2.5-inch SAS drive bays. You could use SATA drives on there too if you want. You have a SATA CD/DVD reader writer combo. This is where a tape drive would go. I forget if it's IDE or SCSI behind there. I feel like it's IDE, but I'm not 100% sure. Anyway, that's where it would go if you had one, but I don't have one in this machine. Over here on the right, you have your indicator lights. You have an actual power button. You have a key switch and a little grounding slot if you were to use a anti-static wrist strap when taking it apart. I'm not going to use an anti-static wrist strap because I live life on the edge, but if you were going to use one, that's where you would plug it in. It's really convenient. So as far as the keys go, for the key, or the kind of like ignition system on these, this is the key. Let me see if I can focus this in for you. Maybe. Let's try backing up just a tad. Oh, I had it. This is always a fun part about YouTube filmmaking, right? There we go. Okay, so you can see the number 007. It's the same key for every server or every M4000. I believe the 4000 and 5000 share the same key. The M8000, the M9000 might share it as well. I'm not sure. But it's the same key for all of them. So if you get one without a key, just order one online secondhand. They're like $5. But this has two positions. It is locked in maintenance. When it's in maintenance mode, which is horizontally, you can't pull it out. You can only pull it out when it's locked. We'll talk a little more in depth about what that actually does, but basically it prevents you from powering down the system by the power button if it's in the locked mode. If it's in maintenance, you can easily do that. I think it also prevents you from actually powering it down from the console as well. The only way to power it down in locked mode is to actually power it off from the operating system itself. So that pretty much covers the front of the box. Let's go ahead and take a look at the back of it. Okay, so here's the back of the M4000. And let's just take it from the top. So right here, you just pull in this little arrow latch and slide this back. And this whole unit will come out. This right here is the XSCF controller. It's basically the equivalent of the ALOM or ILOM on these machines. It is a full embedded Linux computer. As you can see from the back, you've got a few ports. You've got two serial, two Ethernet, a USB. This is the actual management serial port. And it looks like some kind of modem. This is RCI, and it's got a little cross through the phone line, so maybe it's not a modem. I'm not sure what RCI stands for, but it's got it. So let's put that back in. Onto the rest of this stuff. These are all the PCI slots, and this is probably one of my favorite things about the machine is that PCI slots on this are hot swappable. All you have to do is go into the OS, disable the PCI card, and then you can pull it right out. To do that, you just push in this trigger, pull this back, and the whole unit comes out, just like so. This machine did have PCI cards in it at one point, but they were removed before it was sent to me. As you can see, if I pull out one of these bottom ones, there's blanks that are supposed to be there. So at one point, this machine did have PCI cards in it. So I'm actually going to pull all these out, and I'll show you why in a second. See if I can speed this up a little bit. Oh, and this bottom card here is actually a PCIX slot. You can see it right there, PCIX. So now that you have all those out, this is not a hot swappable component. I'm going to have to move this forward a little bit. All you want to do is take a small screwdriver or something pointy and depress a little green, it's like a little green button right there with it. It's hard to see on camera. But it's a little circle right in there. When you do that, this handle will come down, and the whole PCI backplane is removable and replaceable. It is not a hot swap component, if you're wondering. Let's put this latch back up, but you can see inside of there all sorts of fancy. Yeah, the light's kind of crappy in here. You can see a bunch of heat sinks. Those are just a bunch of fancy ASICs and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and put that back in. Oh, also, before I get too far ahead of myself, those are the two Ethernet ports that the operating system can actually use. The Ethernet controller is built into this whole PCI boat, I think is what it's called in the manual. So slide that back in, depress that one more time. Slide it in, push that locked in, and then we can stick all these PCI cards back in. Ooh, that's always fun, right? Sticking everything back together. Shouldn't take too long. Actually, it doesn't really matter. The PCI X1 is the only one that's specific. The rest of them don't matter. I just want to put the two ones that still have blanks in them on the bottom. Just me being picky. Alright, one more after this. Okay, those are all locked back in. These are the two power inlets down here, and it's going to be kind of hard to see, so I'm not going to get a close-up of that, but you'll see this is the kind of cable they use. They use C19 connectors, which I don't really like that much. I wish it was C13. If you don't know what a C13 is, it's the same connector that pretty much every server, computer, monitor, and desktop machine use. My only thought here is that this machine can consume up to 24 amps, which is 12 amps per cord, and they probably didn't want you using that 5 amp cable that your monitor shipped with to power this on and start a fire, so I guess it's somewhat understandable. Anyways, there's only one more removable component from the back, and that is the actual motherboard boat itself, but I can't quite remove it yet because there's some other components that have to come off first. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. Okay, so here's the top of the M4000, and I'm going to show you guys roughly how to kind of take apart some of the replaceable stuff. Kind of a big server, so I'm going to have to get over here on the other side. Try to excuse the microphone cord. So anyways, here are the two small fan modules. These cool the XSCF unit. The power supplies in the front also have fans in them which work to cool the power supplies themselves and the actual PCI modules and all the other components that make up the PCI bay. So to remove these, you need something kind of small. I'm going to use a smaller screwdriver. You just got to stick it in this hole and depress this green button here. Pretty much everything on here has a green button you got to depress somewhere. So you just depress that button and lift up, and the fan trays come out there. There's two here, fan 1 and fan 0. They're exactly the same. They have little indicator lights to tell you whether they've gone bad or not. So let's remove both of those. There's a screw here. That screwdriver is a little small for this one. It doesn't come all the way out. It just gets loose just like the power supply ones do. And then these panels are usually on pretty tight, so I'll just take a flathead screwdriver and wedge it in the corner and just kind of bring this up. And once you get it up far enough, try to be a little gentle because there are little sealing pads on the bottom of these. Once you can get under it with your fingers, you just lift up and this one pulls forward. There are little latches in the front. I got some fan dust on me. So you can't lift up from the front because these latches are embedded in the front end here. So you've got to lift it up from the back, pull forward. But there's not a whole lot of interesting stuff there. You can see the SATA interface for the CD/DVD drive, the back plane for the two drives, or the two hard drives and the tape drive, and all the power stuff. So nothing too crazy there. If you wanted to remove the CD drive, you just have to undo this green screw here, and this whole thing will slide out. But no real reason to do that. Not a whole lot of interesting stuff in there. So let's just go ahead and reattach that. The two primary fans which cool the CPUs and the memory, which is back here, same way. You take a small screwdriver or something you can fit in there, depress the green switch, and they come out just like so. They're relatively large fans. I'm not sure exactly how big they are, but they run on 48 volts. 2 amps at 48 volts. It's a pretty hefty fan. So you'll notice this one has like a little cover that springs up just like the power supplies do. That keeps the airflow going if you pull out fan 1. Fan 0 doesn't have that because it doesn't need it, because if you pull out this fan, then this fan is just the inlet and the whole path of air stays the same. So this is just there to keep the air from fan 0 escaping over the chassis itself. Fan 0 is exactly the same, as you can see. These fans are usually coated in a lot of really, really fine black dust. I've already cleaned them off, but yeah, if you've ever had a Sun server, you know exactly what kind of dust I'm talking about. It's almost as fine as like a toner ink or something, and it's like a real dark black color. As you see, I've got a little bit on my fingers already. So here's the next interesting bit. You just undo this green screw here. It's green screws and green tabs the whole way through. This one's also pretty rough to remove, so I just like to wedge it. This one just slides backwards. You gotta be a little more gentle with this one because you depress up here against the fan trays and you don't want to bend them or warp them. So just be kind of gentle. Once you get it all the way back, you'll feel it stopping. You can get under it. I like to do that right here, and you can kind of just pry it up. And it will all lift off. So, as you can see, here are the two CPUs. These are quite large. These are dual-core SPARC 64-6 processors. And now that I've said that, you'll probably catch on to what I was talking about with the manufacturing. But I'll prove that here in a second. So, as I was saying with these before, they're not traditional CPUs by any means. They are quite large. They have a lot of circuitry on them. I'm going to pop this dust cover off. Come on. Alright, so we got that end. You got to be a little gentle with this. You don't want to break the actual shroud. One more. And on the bottom of it, it's completely sealed. There's no components there, so you don't have to worry about breaking them off like some of the other Sun boards. Let's get this last one off. Alright. So with that removed, now these are advertised as dual-core processors, but that's really not the case. It's two single-core processors. Each processor will do 2 threads, but each CPU, which is considered this whole board, has 2 physical processors on it. Now it's possible that they share some form of cache and they probably share some voltage regulation circuitry, but really it's 2 processors making up one dual-core board. So the threads I was talking about, they're not really traditional multi-threading. It's kind of like a distributed multi-threading system where each one does advertise 2 threads to the operating system, but a core will not process 2 threads at the same time. It'll process a bit from one thread, then switch over to the other thread, and keep going back and forth. So for certain tasks, this is useful, right? If you have a lot of different applications running on this box, and you're using high CPU usage, you can balance those applications by using those threads. But in the case of like compiling applications where you're rocking all of the cores at 100% CPU usage, you do not gain anything by using, for example, this box has 2, 4, 6, 8 threads, right? By using 8 compilation threads, you don't actually gain any time there, like you would like on Intel hyper-threading boxes. In fact, in my experience using GCC, compiling an application, I just say compile with 4 threads, and you'll still see CPU utilization, all of them at 100%, according to the operating system, but compile times actually go a little bit quicker because those threads aren't fighting for CPU time. They're all guaranteed CPU time. So in a multi-application setup, it's useful, and probably any real-world setup, it's probably more useful than GCC, but do keep that in mind if you're going to use one of these for something like that. And in all reality, if your application is using 100% CPU usage on all of your CPUs, you probably should just get another server, or a bigger server, or faster processors or whatever. So as far as processors go, these are the SPARC 64 6s. Is this going in the right way? No. There are SPARC 64 7s, which are a little faster, and then SPARC 64 7 pluses, which actually are dual core on each chip. So you actually would have 16 threads in that case, and those are still pretty expensive. So to put this back in, you want to lift these latches up. This one seems stuck. There we go. You don't actually just want to stick the processor in the slot. You want to let it rest on the latches and then use the latches to plug it in. This is the exact same processor over here. And then back here we have the RAM boards. They're a little easier to work with. Just take standard DDR2 RAM. You flip this up, this is on hinges, and you can see 8 RAM slots. You can use up to 8 GB memory units, and 8 times 8 is 64. 64 times 4 is 128 or 256, and that gives you your 256 gigs of RAM. Well, actually, I didn't explain the second part to you. I don't know if it's on this board. I think it might be on the CPU board. Ooh, I hope not. Don't want to pull another one out. Looks like it is. Okay, so bear with me here. I'm going to have to retake the shroud off. I'll try to be a little quicker this time. Okay, I know it's on here somewhere. Should be. Oh yeah, there it is. Okay, so I'm going to walk over to the camera. And if I can get it to focus in, you'll see that little logo right there. It's a Fujitsu logo. That's because technically this is a Fujitsu machine. Some of you probably caught on to that when I told you they were SPARC 64 processors and not an UltraSPARC. But yeah. So this is essentially just a rebranded machine under Sun's name. I don't know what they're actually called by Fujitsu. I don't know if they're called M4000s or whatnot, but it's a Fujitsu box. Everything's pretty much labeled Fujitsu. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is actually show you how you can remove the whole motherboard unit. And to do that, I don't know why I put this back in, but I'll actually have to remove all of these. You can't remove the motherboard until you remove both CPUs and all of the RAM boards. So I'm going to remove that real quick, and then we'll change over to the back side of the server. Okay, so we're looking at the back of the M4000 again, and this is just really quick how you remove the entire motherboard assembly, or the motherboard boat, as it's called by Fujitsu. So you want to unscrew these 2 green set screws, and just like the power supplies, when those are loose, this lever will come down, and this whole unit can very easily be removed. So this is pretty much a single replaceable unit. If you're removing it while the server is in a rack, you want to make sure that you actually grab the bottom of the actual unit itself. It is metal on the bottom, but it does have enough weight to actually bend as you're removing it, and breaking one of these is not fun, and it's not cheap, even on the secondhand market. Pretty sure if you break one of these, you might as well just buy a whole new server. Okay, so this just slides right back in the way it came out. Pull the latch down. Alright, and put those set screws back in. And that's really it. There's nothing all too interesting about it. It's just a dumb board, essentially. It doesn't even have a whole lot of logic on it. It just interfaces all of the processors and memory cards together. There are some voltage regulators on it you can replace, but that's about it. So now that we've pretty much covered the entire server, let's go ahead, power it on, and take a look at the actual interface for the XSCF controller. Okay, so I've got my laptop hooked up to the server. It is just a standard laptop running OpenSUSE Linux, and I'm using the screen application to connect my USB to serial converter to the actual server itself through the management console. So let's flip the power switch on, or through the power strip, and it should start booting up. With any luck. Yep, there we go. So this usually takes a minute or two to go down. So we'll just wait it out. You'll probably hear some fans rev up. Basically, it's going to go through some tests, and then it will rev up the 2 power supply fans and the cooling fans for the XSCF board. You'll see some things on here that basically tell you it's running Linux. And yeah, so let's fast forward a little bit up to the point to where the fans start coming on. Okay, so you can hear the fan starting up now. And if you think that's loud, this is coming through a headset microphone. So if you think that's loud, it gets way louder than that, trust me. So they should rev down here shortly. There we go. Yeah, so like I said, it gets quite a bit louder than that. If anything, this server is a 100% certified, not for home use machine. It draws enough power to make you hate your electric bill and blow out most circuit breakers, because most of those are 15 amps. It puts out enough heat to pretty much replace your furnace. And it's big, heavy, and super loud. So unless you're a super die-hard person, this is a 100% do not run this at your house machine. So anyways, the XSCF console is loaded. I'm going to show you real quick how you can reset the SSCF or the XSCF console. I've already done it, but I will show you how you can. So you log in with the user default. This user exists on all of the M series servers, and it will tell you to change the key switch to service. Press return and leave it there for at least 5 seconds, and we'll change it back. So it's probably pretty close. And we are in. This guy, or this account, pretty much has the power to do almost everything. I believe the command is restore defaults. Yes. It's restore defaults taxi factory. That command right there will restore the whole thing, but that takes a long time, and I've already done it. So there's no reason for me to do it. All the other documentation you could possibly want on this is online, freely available through Oracle, Fujitsu, and a bunch of other people's blogs who blog about this stuff. So we're going to log into the account I already created. And I'm going to power on this system just so you guys can kind of hear how crazy loud it is. When it's booting, super crazy loud. It does die down after it's started the boot process, but it's still pretty loud even after that. To do that, you do power on TACD00. And basically what that's saying is going to power on domain 0. This machine can run 2 domains. A domain is actually like a physical segmentation of the hardware. So you can literally say, give this domain this CPU board and these RAM boards, and give this domain this other CPU board and these other RAM boards. And you can distribute the PCI devices however you want, and basically run 2 operating systems on one box and completely independent of each other. If one has a hardware failure, the other one still stays running. So that's really cool in my opinion. It's a little bit limited on the M4000 just because the hard drives and the CD drive will always go to domain 0 no matter what. So I don't run a second domain. In that case, you would want to use like fiber channel storage or something else on the PCI bus. But anyway, let's go ahead and power it on. Yes, we want to continue. Of course. We've got to set the date and time. I forgot the battery on the XSCF on this thing is crapping out on me. So it's 2015.11.10, that's fine. I believe it's hyphen. We'll just say it's 12.00.00. I forget the formats for this. You know what? I know what we can do. Let's look it up. That's always fun, right? That's going to be probably really hard for you guys to see. Let me see if I can fix the camera real quick. There we go. Let's see. Hyphen. That was right. Oh, it's at date tech S. Okay, let's go back to this. Reset the camera again. Cool. So that's not the exact time, but it's pretty close. Okay, the XSCF console is going to reset and reboot. So let's fast forward through that real quick, and then we will power the thing on. Okay, so it's booted up again. Let's log in with our account. And so what you need to do is power on TAC D00. The other thing I didn't tell you is once you've done that, to actually get to the Open Boot console or the Open Boot prom, you'll have to do console TAC D00 after you do the power on command. But this should be fine. Let's hope this goes through. Alright, so the system is powered on, and any second now, you will hear how loud it is. Yep, it is a loud machine for sure. Now it should die down here in a few seconds. Alright, so we should start to see some input on the console about it doing some power on self-test stuff. Any second now. It's not exactly the fast booter here. In fact, you'll find the bigger the Sun machine, the longer it takes to boot. There we go. So it's going to power on self-test. So we can go ahead and power this off now. Yeah. So from there, you would be able to install Solaris, Open Solaris, or Lumos, FreeBSD, you know, Linux, whatever operating system you want to install from that console prompt. You stick in the CD drive and boot it, just like any other Sun machine, and you'll be on your way with one hell of a Sun server. Well, I think that just about covers it for this video. So if you guys have any questions or comments, please leave them below the video, and you guys take it easy. Thanks.